the Atlanta Braves are our first team up, and they've got a lot of interesting things going on right now that you might not expect. A little bit of controversy at shortstop with what they're going to do there, and some questions about their fifth starter and who that's going to be. But do you have like those are kind of smaller questions. What's your like grand question for the Braves? Like what is the make or break aspect of this team that I don't think it really will be decided by their fifth starter. And as good as Vaughn Grissom might be able to be, I don't actually think it will be decided by the shortstop thing either. But I'd like to hear what you have to say on that. What do you think is the big
Yeah.
question for the Braves this year?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think everyone's making a big deal about them losing Dansby Swanson, and certainly it is going to be a hole, and it's going to be tough to have a guy who really hasn't been hailed as like one of these great top prospects filling in there. I think that's something to watch. But to me, the question I have for this Braves team is Ronald Acuna going to emerge again as one of the top players in baseball? Because we've seen injury, we've seen kind of a is someone calling my hotel room? Guys, nobody has this number. I don't know who would possibly be calling my hotel room.
It's a landline. My God. I haven't
Who
heard
is
one of those
calling?
in a while.
Oh goodness. They must have the wrong number because I have no idea who would be not
Yeah,
using my cell phone to get a hold of me. Anyway, Ronald Acuna to me is the
yeah.
question. Like, can he be that guy again? Like, we've seen the injury, and we've also seen. Obviously, people are going to say, "Well, Braves won the World Series without him." I got it. However, this is a different team, and I want to see, especially with the new rules. You add 4.5 inches to a base for a guy who's fast. I want to see. I want to see more dynamic, athletic plays from guys like Ronald Acuna. I want to see if he can reestablish himself in that upper tier in baseball because I think he's had it down a couple of years. And to me, he's a guy who can carry the Braves through. Yes, they won the World Series without him. This is a team that doesn't have Freddie Freeman and a bunch of other guys who are on that World Series team.
Mm-hmm.
So, spare me that. I think he still matters. He still is a young star in the game. And he's a guy who, when he's batting or if he's doing anything, you're stopping and you're watching, right? Similar to, we'll get to Miami later, but Jazz Chisholm, right? Can he be that guy? We've seen flashes, but he's had trouble kind of staying on the field. I want to see Ronald Acuna. I think that matters more than people realize for this Atlanta Braves team, because honestly, to me, this might be the toughest division in baseball. If you told me the Phillies, the Braves, and the Mets won the World Series, you wouldn't be all that surprised, right? How many divisions can we say 3 teams? Hey, they won the World Series, and you would be like, all right, that makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. The interesting thing for me on Acuna is that the available research about something like as big as an ACL tear is slightly negative. It basically says that whatever tier you were at before, you kind of go down a tier. And this came out of football. So I don't know if these are fundamentally different sports where it doesn't matter as much. And it could be, right? Because football is more of a sort of move in 3 directions, move in 3D, right? Baseball is kind of like moving 2D almost, right? Like you're running towards first base, you're running in line, you're not cutting, you're not cutting left and right as often. And so maybe Acuna can get back to 100% of what he was before, or maybe he can't. I mean, that there are things that happen when you have devastating injuries like an ACL tear. Some guys don't get all the way back. I would say that the underlying stats hint at his ability to get back. He hit a ball 117 miles an hour last year. He only did that once before his injury. So he hit the ball as hard as ever last year in short bursts. He just needs to kind of get back to that doing it all the time aspect. And I think he has that in him. So, it's been fun to watch him at the WBC too. Like he's just such an engaging player that I buy that he has oversized input on the outcomes for a Braves team that has lost Freddie Freeman and is maybe looking for a leader in that style. Where is it going to be Austin Riley or Matt Olson, or is it going to be Acuna? Is it a collective effort to kind of lead them? They do have the star power. We are right now in the middle of this controversy with the Braves, where Vaughn Grissom has not started 5 games in a row at shortstop. It's the end of the world. I kind of think that if you have a championship contender, and by the projected numbers at Fangraphs, the Braves are the number one team in terms of projected wins on Fangraphs. If you have a championship contender, do you just go with a championship defender at short? Doesn't that almost make sense to just say, let's have the best defense we can have because we have enough offense? Where do you sit on this Vaughn Grissom versus Orlando Arcia debate?
Yeah, I agree, because you look at their WRC plus as a team last year, they were only 7th. However, that's because they trade strikeouts and walks for power, right? They hit a lot of home runs. So if you're going to fill that slot, do you really need another guy who's going to be an offensive first player? I agree with you. Why not just have a guy who can defensively make the plays? You look at this lineup and it's scary. It's stacked. I think there's I don't think there's any debating that, right? This is a very, very good lineup. So to me, I agree with you. I think, listen, they let Dansby Swanson go. They knew that they weren't going to have a Dansby Swanson waiting in the wings. It's just not the way that they were set up. But I think that they can cover all that and then some, as we talked about. If Acuna has a good year, if Matt Olson, continues to, kind of be the guy who they thought he was when they got him from Oakland. Riley, I mean, this is a team that has a very young, controllable core, because that's all Alex Anthopoulos does is lock up these young stars. So this is a team set up not just for this year, but for the next couple of years. So I would personally roll the dice with him, see what he's like early on, and know that it's okay to sacrifice offense for defense, especially because we're playing in a world, without shifts, where range becomes important. So aren't we going to maybe see a little bit of a trend toward a more defensive-oriented players? I mean, remember even 10 years ago on rosters, there was that guy who was the utility guy who couldn't hit a lick, but defensively was terrific. Every team had one. That's slowly gone away in favor of just like this pinch hit guy, right? Because we valued offense for so long because the shift was going on, and you can't shift against a home run. Well, this is going to change now. So I would like to see, maybe teams start to gravitate toward a little bit more defense at the expense of offense, especially when you have a lineup like Atlanta's.
And especially when you have the new shift rules, right?
Exactly.
There's just a more emphasis on that. The Astros won it all, right? The Astros won it all. They had Martin Maldonado behind the plate. They had Yuli Gurriel at first, and Chas McCormick in center. Like that's three places where you don't have great offense, and they still won, right? And I would say the Braves in Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud have a better offense than Martin Maldonado. I don't think that's being rude to Martin Maldonado to say, right?
No. But if you talk to Houston, Martin Maldonado is the guy. Nobody wants to throw to anybody else. So
right.
there is a lot of
I think the Braves are blessed with two catchers that people love throwing to and are good offensively. I mean, I saw Sean Murphy up close in Oakland. He works really, really hard, and I think people like throwing to him. Well, and Matt Olson, no shame to say he's better than Yuli Gurriel. So, and then Michael Harris II, probably better than Chas McCormick. So you've afforded yourself the ability. They did not replace Dansby Swanson with a one player. Basically, they said, if we just have really good offense from everywhere else, we can afford one place. Every championship team can still afford one place where you don't get offense. And so I think that's what's happening with Vaughn Grissom. I don't know what it means for Vaughn Grissom long term. That's something that he'll have to figure out. It may have to do with going back to the minors and just showing them that he can be a good defensive shortstop, or maybe it'll end up in the outfield. What is nice about this team is they've got great pitching at the top, and they seem to be breaking out some more great pitching with Jared Schuster and Dylan Dodd really shoving this spring. I personally would make Mike Soroka my fifth starting pitcher, but there are definite health issues there. And then they even have Ian Anderson, who they sent down. So in terms of depth there, I think they're going to be good. I mean, this is why projections like them. They're just really good offensively everywhere. Eddie Rosario was hitting the crap out of the ball in the WBC after getting eye surgery in the offseason. He's likely to be one of their two worst offensive players. So I don't really see what's the flip side of it. What's the story that it goes bad for them? Where do you see a slight weakness in the projections, or a slight weakness in where could this team go south?
So if I had to poke holes, I think maybe the second half of the starting rotation, right? You got Spencer Strider, you got Max Fried, but then you start to get a little like, right? You got Charlie Morton, you've got, is it Kyle Wright that they have that's
Yeah,
kind of,
Kyle Wright.
right?
Yeah,
Kyle
Kyle
Wright,
Wright
yeah.
has an inconsistent command. Charlie Morton's getting older. That's
Right. So then
true.
so then you kind of wonder like, okay, maybe that back half, Ian Anderson, maybe those guys start to underperform a little bit. I think, you haven't seen the best yet of Spencer Strider. Max Fried continues to kind of be the ace of that staff, but
Right.
maybe when we talk about depth of the starting rotation, again, we're nitpicky. I think the bullpen's going to be good again. I think if it's
Mhm.
going to go wrong, you're going to maybe see that starting pitching depth tested, and they don't necessarily go 7, 8 deep where you feel okay if some of these guys kind of falter. You could say that about a lot of teams, though. Really, I feel like
Yeah,
I'm very much nitpicking to figure out a scenario where
it's
the
really
Atlanta
hard.
Braves aren't very good, right? Maybe
Yeah.
Acuna gets hurt again, and nobody hits. They go through these spells where this lineup all of a sudden, the strikeouts are up, the power's not there. A lot of things kind of have to go wrong for Atlanta to not be in it. And keep in mind, even last year when the Mets looked like they buried them, they didn't. Atlanta went on a historic run to end up overtaking them in the division. So even if they have a bad month, I don't think you can write off Atlanta. I don't think you can write off Atlanta really ever. I mean, they're just a really good, well-run organization with that keeps churning out really
Oh my
good
goodness.
prospects. I mean, they're AAA. They're not going to go away anytime soon. I think that's important to remember. I remember when I covered DC for those 2 years in 19 and 20, and I was like, God, Atlanta's good now. But then also look at their AAA team. And this was a couple years ago. And it was like that team was stacked. It's like this organization is just not going away. They lock up their young talent. They have a great core, as I mentioned. Even if they stumble here and there, I just don't see them not in it, especially with the expanded playoffs.
Yeah, I do think that the cupboard is getting a little bit more bare as these guys are graduating. But they signed them all to like 10-year deals, so
Yeah.
they're still going to be around, and that gives them 4 or 5 years to replenish their minor leagues as these players play through their peaks in the major leagues. The only weakness I see offensively is that strikeout rate. You mentioned it a couple times, and it is fairly high for teams last year that struck out the most. It was the Angels, the Pirates, the Braves, the Tigers, and the Marlins. That's an interesting group to be in. I mean, you're the best team in that five, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you look at the teams that struck out the least, you get mostly playoff teams: the Guardians, the Astros, the Mets, the Cardinals, and the Blue Jays. They're all playoff teams, so it's not the best facet of their offense is their strikeouts. So and that's something that Vaughn Grissom could help them with. He is a guy who makes contact, and maybe that's that's how he plays his way onto this team. But you kind of want to see some growth in terms of strikeout rate, maybe some better seasons from some of their guys, and maybe it'll be a priority for them